So Kim and I are really excited to talk to you today, Amanda, and just how are you taking this all in? This is a whole new world for you, isn't it?
It is in many ways. And then in many ways, I feel like in Pets for Life, we were positioned for a crisis like this because our work day in and day out, we often refer to it as the disaster of poverty. So we see people who are experiencing all of the circumstances that happen when there is a natural or a human-made disaster where there's a lack of access to resources. People are struggling financially. They're displaced from homes. Transportation is an issue. Those are things that people who live in poverty in an underserved areas go through all of the time. And of course, it is elevated and it is deepened during this crisis. But in many ways, these are issues that we've dealt with for the entirety of the Pets for Life program, and that the people we serve deal with consistently.
Right now, we are in a really terrifying time, I think, for the entire country. And I can't help but notice in the meetings that we're in together, people are looking to you for, what do we do for outreach? How do we help the underserved community and our most vulnerable population? Like, talk to us. What can shelters do that don't have your full program in place? What can they be doing right now to help those vulnerable communities?
There's a combination of what can be done directly, and then I think what can be done philosophically. I don't know about you all, but because this is such trying times and it's so overwhelming and we have a lot of uncertainty, you operate sort of in the immediate, but you're also thinking long term, what are going to be the impacts and sort of repercussions to come from this? And that's where I think the philosophy of Pets for Life applies. It's always been one of treat others with kindness and without judgment. And we need that more than ever during a situation that is as sort of widespread and as extreme as this virus is to understand that people are more alike than they are different. And when we sort of extend that compassion and we have empathy for others, we're much more successful. And I think having sort of a fair and equitable resource distribution. So I think that there is that. It is just that simple. That's something everybody can do that doesn't have a price tag. That obviously is not everything that is needed because real services and resources are necessary as well. And on that end, if a group doesn't already have a community outreach program, this is obviously a tough time to try to connect with the community because you can't do it through the tried and true methods of door-to-door, face-to-face. And so finding other ways to connect, that there are social service agencies, there are faith-based organizations, there are human food banks that I think animal groups, if you don't already have kind of that foundation of connection to the community, reach out to and find out from those entities what they're seeing. Most of the time, those groups will report back that people are asking them for support for their pets, that's part of their request, that's part of what they see, and they just don't have the bandwidth or the capability to do it. And so they'll be looking for groups to partner with that support people with their pets. And if groups already have a community outreach program in some form, whether it's just beginning, whether it is robust and comprehensive, is to just make sure that people know you're still there for them. It may not look the way that it did yesterday, and tomorrow it may even look different from today, but that you're there to do as much as you can. And sometimes that's just listening, but then finding those ways that you can still make deliveries, with social distancing in mind, to text from your car so people don't open their doors, so you don't have to knock on doors, to leave things on people's porches at their front doors. There are still ways to get supplies, especially food during this time, out to people without putting yourself at risk and without the risk of exposing the community.
What are you seeing in your Pets for Life communities now? Obviously they're scared.
Yeah.
Tell us about some stuff that's happening.
I think that this is where animals bring everybody together, and they're sort of the great equalizer, is that we're seeing the same thing that I think everybody across the country and really the world is what everyone's experiencing right now, which is fear, and that uncertainty of just what is to come, what is tomorrow going to bring. And because of that, pets mean more to people now than they ever did. And I think the less that you have, often financially, the more that unconditional love and the joy that your pet can bring you really matters in your life. And that's something that, again, I think us as service providers, as sort of the holders of information, we can really honor that love and bond that people have.
Seeing collaboration with human services and pet services during this time, is it growing? How is it, what's happening out there with that? Because I in some respects I hear that, there's a lot of collaboration, and then in other venues there's no connection.
I think it's very, just like you're hearing, that's what we're seeing and hearing as well, is that every community is different. And I think every community has different levels of capability in responding to a crisis this extreme. And so groups that maybe had partnerships in place already find that it's easier to maintain those, and that the lines of communication are open. If there weren't partnerships, it's almost an impossible time to start to build them. That doesn't mean that the effort shouldn't be made and to try, but I think that most community-based groups and sort of human health or public health agencies are absolutely inundated right now. And it's kind of hard to penetrate, just how much people are responding to and receiving every day. Again, I think that we have to make the attempt, but we're just seeing it community to community. It really varies, and how much of those partnerships are happening. But I think that at an absolute worst case, to make those connections now can set animal welfare up in the future to be a strong community partner.
Already such a significant need in the community. How do you foresee the future over these next few months with everything that we're anticipating?
Well, first of all, I think it's going to be more than a few months. I really think this is going to be a few years. I think that we're going to see the economic impact of this take us well into the future. And it's in part because what you said, there are demographics of people and neighborhoods and areas of every community that are sort of ignored and forgotten, or maybe even are looked down upon by people. And those are sort of the folks who are hit first, because those are people who are already struggling financially, who have hourly low wage jobs, who have no paid time off. And weeks ago, a lot of those people started to be impacted. And then I think that, there's so much research and there's so many studies around how when someone lives in poverty and has a setback, it's almost impossible to ever get sort of to a place of even again. And this is at a whole other level of setback. And then you add to that what you were saying as well, that there's going to be, I think, a much higher quantity of people now who are impacted financially, who people maybe, were working class, even middle class, who now with loss of jobs and we don't know when the economy is going to bounce back, especially certain sectors, that people are going to be struggling for a while. So I think that the work of Pets for Life, the methodology of Pets for Life is going to be something that can be incorporated in an even sort of more broad spectrum way in our field moving forward, and will need to be if we are to respond to this crisis effectively and as sort of comprehensively as possible. Of course, we know we can't be everything to everyone, and sometimes the need is so great that we can't meet it. But I think that we've learned a lot through Pets for Life that is going to apply and that hopefully can be utilized moving forward, and how we reach people, how we treat people, and just really simply in how we see people.
And kind of interesting talking to these animal welfare leaders, because a lot of them are saying that moving forward, we are going to see change. We're going to see change in the sheltering industry. And you're obviously talking about seeing change in community outreach in the way that we see underserved communities. Are you confident in that? Do you think that COVID-19 and this experience that we're having now is going to create lasting change in the way that shelters do outreach and the way that we view our communities?
It's a tough issue to speak to, because I in no way want to dismiss the hurt that people are experiencing because of COVID-19. But if we are to find any sliver of a silver lining, I think that it's just that this might force us, especially some people who have been hesitant in the past, to fully engage outside of the shelter, to get out into the community and build trust and build relationships and get to know all parts of the community. I think that now we're in a place where that's not an option, that groups are going to have to engage in that way, or else they're going to become obsolete. You know, I think we were seeing the trajectory already in companion animal welfare, that it was one that was going to move to more of a community level. Sheltering is always going to be important. It's going to be a necessary piece of the puzzle, but it won't be the only piece like I think it has been historically, that now we're sort of adding in this other component that is just going to be absolutely vital, I think, to the success of our field, and to us staying relevant and really thinking about not just the pets, but the people who are connected to the pets.
I heard a rumor before we go that you might have acquired a cat.
We'd like to see your cat.
Yes, we need proof that you are now a cat person.
This is the first ever cat in my life. His name is Bieber, but he likes to go by the Beebs.
The Beebs.
Yes.
Oh, he's ridiculously cute. So what's the story? How is he your first cat? Where do you come from?
You know, I never had a cat before, in part because a dog that I got in my early 20s, who lived to be 18 and a half, she absolutely hated cats. And so I had tried, you know, here or there throughout the years to foster, do different things, and it never worked. So I always said once she was no longer with me, I would be able to get a cat. And I lost her about a year and a half ago. And so I was waiting for the right cat. And one of my Pets for Life trips, I always get to tour the shelters and get to see all of the great work that the local organizations are doing. And I walked into a cat room and we locked eyes, and it was love at first sight. And I knew he had to be mine.
That's fantastic. Well, congratulations